If you haven't taken the drawing class, you should go back and do that first. It will help with what we're about to do. We're going to take the knowledge we established in that lesson of how the natural notes of the musical alphabet are laid out, and I'm going to show you a couple helpful patterns that will allow you to greatly expand on that knowledge and turn it into a much greater understanding of where you find particular notes on the fretboard. I'll also try, as I did in the first video, to relate this to many of the other instruments, which is why I have the guitar in my hands again. Also because the guitar has 6 strings and this one has 20 frets per string, so there's 120 possible notes we could play. That's the most of any of them. The first thing to do when you're trying to expand on your knowledge of the notes is to find places where information repeats. So on the guitar, for instance, you have 2 E strings. So you can know if you're playing the 3rd fret of the low E string, which is a G, there must also be a G on the 3rd fret of the high E string, or a B on the 7th fret, an A on the 5th fret, and so forth. On the banjo, this is really critical because the banjo in its standard tuning has 2 G strings and 2 D strings, 1 B string. So you really only need to learn the G and the D string once because they're always going to have the same notes on them. After that, the next thing you want to do is learn the shape of an octave. So if you were to put your index finger on the 5th fret of the low E string and then skip over a string so that you land on the 7th fret of D, the 4th string, with your ring finger, you've played 1A, and now that's the next octave of A that you could play. That same shape repeats if you move down. Now I'm on the A string, whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D. This is extremely important for the bass because that means with the bass having the same tuning as the top 4 strings of the guitar, just at a much lower frequency, that these 2 shapes get you all over the neck. So in a sense, it's like you have to learn just 2 strings rather than 4 if you start to get comfortable with this method of identifying notes. On the guitar, unfortunately, once we get down to the next string, the 5th fret of the D string, we have to stretch a little further on the B string to the 8th fret to get the octave there. So before it was the index and ring on the 7th, but now when we drop down here, it's the pinky and the index, the pinky being on the 8th. That same shape repeats when you move down to the next strings as well. So now we can come back to that A note, come to the 7th fret, and from there we could also go like that. So we have A, 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 back to the 5th fret of the E string again. We could do that anywhere. We could do C, C, and then here we have to go to that C, and then stretch out a little further for that note, and then we could get back there to a C as well. I found learning octaves and starting to work with those to be maybe the last and most helpful step in fully establishing a knowledge of where I could find notes on the neck. It took a lot of time and a lot of patience, so it's one of these things that you just want to keep exercising each practice session. If you can spend just a moment whenever that curiosity about notes pops into your mind, don't ignore it, dive in just for a short time, and if you do that enough, you'll never have to sit down and memorize the chart. It will just start to connect over time, as most things do in practice, but that patience and time is really of the essence.